around knowing what it is. Sorry, I'm just going live. What it is to live and breathe raising an autistic child. She knows what it's like. And I say this with the experiences that I've had. I don't know many child psychologists that have had children on the spectrum, who are raising children on the spectrum. And so when they deliver that news or they deliver recommendations, it's not with lived experience. And this is why I am so excited to have Dr. Megha here today, because she will not only bring a wealth of knowledge, but also tools and strategies around how you can better cope with this situation. Because like so many of us, no one walks into this journey and it's like, oh, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to do with my child and I've got all the resources at my disposal. Most of us are walking into this journey going, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not coping. This isn't how I expected my life to go. So I am so delighted to introduce Dr. Megha. Dr. Megha, thank you so much for coming in. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I think I'm in so awe of the work you do. I'm so in awe of your emotional sincerity and the depth of your efforts. I think it really shows how much you care. And I really enjoy your chats, enjoy the blogs. I think in the world of disability, where there's a lot of doom and gloom, I like the email that pops up from you every now and then with the blogs. This is so uplifting.
Oh,
Thanks for all
good.
the
I'm
work
so
that you
glad.
do. Mhm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, just share with us a little bit about your journey and what that looked like when you first had got your diagnosis of your son's autism, and then like what's happening rather to date now.
Sure. So starting from the start, right? Starting with the pregnancy, it was a really enjoyable one, and like all expectant parents, we thought doesn't matter, boy or girl, as long as the baby is healthy, right?
Mhm.
Just for the 5 years prior to falling pregnant, I'd done my advanced studies and training at a highly specialized mental health and neurosciences institute in Bangalore, in India. And given the sheer population of the country, I remember that the outpatient departments would be, full of people waiting to seek help. You'd see the most complex presentations in this hospital, people who have tried everywhere in the country and even overseas for help and just desperate for some answers, because this institute did have some cutting edge technology as well. So it was a dive into the deep end. In my early 20s, we saw some of the most severe presentations, most complicated ones around muscular dystrophy, childhood degenerative disorders, severe autism, and my training as a trainee therapist involved therapies, doing IQ assessments, assessments for autism, doing disability assessments to qualify families for a disability pension from the government. And I remember back then thinking, how do these parents cope? How do they do this? We just take progression for granted. But here I was talking to parents who just saw children who lost the milestones that they gained. And yeah, and here 10 years down the line, I am that parent. And I might have got some answers, and I still don't have some answers. But I know that I've learned that autism doesn't discriminate. And it's one of life's ironies. Like my therapist says, who says an oncologist can't get cancer? Um,
You are so right on that. It doesn't judge. I have spoken to clients who are very wealthy, right? Who have all the resources. And then I've also spoken to clients who are coming from a more disadvantaged background, who
yeah.
don't have those same resources. And it's not, autism doesn't come in and go like, oh, I'll pick you and I'll pick you. No, it's just,
Yeah.
I feel like it's like the luck of the draw. Is it genetics? Is it the food? Like there's so many things that we can look at, but the reality is that, like I just wrote in my email, I sent out a blog on Monday, the shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
Yeah.
We can't change the past. It is whether you think or you don't think that you caused or didn't cause your child's autism. The reality is that this child now is presenting with autism, and we need to get the best help for him as well, or her, as well as parents, right? As well as us. making sure that we're looking after us. So what do you think, in terms of challenges, do parents face when they're confronted with an autism diagnosis?
I think there's, at the initial stage, there's probably feelings of emotional shock, that, there's such a discrepancy between what they expected they would have and, everything that they imagined life would be as a parent is now so uncertain. And I think grief is a big one as well. And I think different parents go through it so differently. Some are faster in that process, some take a longer time. And I think it's important to respect each parent's unique process. And I suppose guilt is a big one too. Did parents do something to cause it? And I suppose shame, feelings of shame. And I think calling shame shame is hard. And I think a deviation from what the society expects a family would look like. And I suppose, and if there's a deviation from that, there's a feeling of, an inadequacy, and that can cause a lot of shame as well. And a lack of understanding around autism itself could be so overwhelming and confusing. And then there's, of course, navigating healthcare systems, education systems, and feeling quite alienated from friendship groups, isolation. I think all of this apart, there is an important point. I think to know that by the time people become parents, they're already carrying some baggage from their own lives, right? So it's not like a diagnosis brings up all the issues. Sometimes it can just resurface some of the pre-existing issues. For example, if a parent already has feelings of feeling a bit different and not fitting in, and now they have a child with neurodivergence, right? That only amplifies that feeling. Or if there's a family that's, or there's a couple that has some cracks in the marriage, the strain and the stress of raising a child with disability can just expose or worsen it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I think that um, it's so hard for parents because there's not always, right? Unless you are aware, there's not always that forewarning that autism is coming. Unless you are around children that you understand what autism was or
Yeah.
is, that you know what it looks like and how it presents in children. Most parents that I speak to feel like they're completely sidelined and just weren't expecting it. Whereas if you are in the position of yourself, or whether you were someone who works in education, you might pick up the signs that your child is autistic, and that blow then doesn't necessarily come as hard, one would presume. But I'm looking at your face, your indicators, and think maybe you've got a different opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I know, when our little boy was born, I remember thinking when he was just a little baby, he made eye contact. And I remember telling my husband, oh, he's had social smile. He's looking, he's smiling, he's making eye contact. I think we're safe now. Doesn't look like there's autism. And we didn't pick up any of the early signs until it was actually my parents and my sister who visited around the 18-month mark, and they said, oh, he's actually not quite looking when we point to the aeroplane. And that's when the doubt started to arise in my head, and it was a constant dialogue in my own head. Is it not? And just, you know just giving him the best chance, trying everything before putting a label on him for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
So I think
definitely.
you just forget these things when you're a parent yourself, even though there's so much prior experience. And sometimes it really takes someone from the outside to point it out to you.
I also think that when you're so close, right, when you are, living and breathing with that person,
Yeah.
it's very hard to pick up on what's happening. And very much like when our children grow, right? We're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, he's growing a little bit. And then it's until someone comes in, you're like, whoa, this kid's had a big growth spurt, right? So it's
Mm.
not until we have that external person coming in and saying, hey, hang on, we just need to look at this.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you didn't pick up on any of those signals, because do you think that you would have changed anything if you were to do it again? Like if you were to have your time over again, do you think that you would have noticed different things, or do you think that you would have been like, no, I pretty much would have run the same strategy?
Um, I think I wish I would have maybe spent lesser time resisting it and just seen things for what they were. because I think once it's only when you stop resisting and start to flow, do you have the energy to advocate and actually meet the needs of your family. So I suppose the initial stage was really all my mental energy was spent asking, is it not? But of course, we did start all the therapies, whether it was or it wasn't autism. We just thought we have to meet his needs. So we did start all the therapies, but it was an emotionally rough time when there's a constant battle in your head and there's so much uncertainty. And I suppose it really, that phase really hasn't, it doesn't really ever stop. Sometimes I just feel like grief, it's not as raw and painful as it used to be, but it still comes up in shorter spurts. And it sometimes crosses my mind what neurotypical would have looked like at different stages of life.
So I think that as parents, we all have that same thought process. First of all, like what life would have looked like. I know I've
Yeah.
definitely had that thought. Like, where would I have been if this was different, right? If my angel boy was typical, what job would I have done? Because obviously, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. Would I be in the corporate rat race? Would I be completely unfulfilled? Would I be doing something else? Like, it's an interesting way to look at things. Oh, you said something, and I think it's really important for parents to hear this again, and I'm going to repeat it because I think it's really important. That idea of resistance, of like hoping, and I can tell you right now, even after we got my angel boy's diagnosis, that desperate hope that he was going to grow out of it, right? Like every year would come and he would just magically come out of it and just start talking, right? Magic happens and like miracles happen every day, and he's just going to start talking, and that's how it's going to be. And then I would get to that next year and I would be absolutely crushed that we hadn't gone as far as I thought that we were, right? Because in my mind, because I've got such high expectations, right? I'm running the marathon, like, oh, we're at the end line, right?
Yeah.
And when you don't get there and you're like, hang on, we're still back at the start, that's a hard place to be. So you're going to.
Absolutely.
Sorry, were you going to add something to that? Sorry.
No, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so in terms of your journey, how do you feel, or what have you done to be more supported? Like, what's happened in your life, or who are the people that you've relied on, or strategies that you've used in order to feel more supported?
Oh, definitely follow people like Natalie. I think it's great. I love what you do. My husband and I place a big value on self-care, and I know that what you do is really helping parents. And um, my husband and I have been in therapy long before we had kids, and I think that comes from being in our profession. We owe it to our clients to kind of work through our own personal issues in order to show up as responsible professionals. But I think I'm from a school that believes that we can all use a therapist at some point in time in our lives. There's only a limit. There's only a certain limit to how much we can be our own therapists within the space of our own heads. So yeah, I think a lot of self-care and processing grief, having that space where you can just cry, where you can just express those raw feelings so that you can show up as a parent who's kind of worked through that and it doesn't creep up in your interactions with the child. So I think that's big. That's a big thing. And as a family, we are not afraid to ask for help. It takes a lot for us to do things that come very easily to typical families. So we always have an extra set of hands. We have a carer. If you have, just simple things like a social event or just anything or holiday, we try and have extra people so that we have the needs of both the kids taken care of. And I think also having a very carefully chosen team, a team of therapists that think like you. We have a behavior consultant, we have carers, we have cleaners, and we have friends who love our kids like their own. And I believe if you found a carer, a really good carer, a lovely carer, don't lose them. Keep them.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. It's so hard to find people who can truly connect with your children. And it's magic when it happens, right? When you see someone and their eyes light up when they see them and they're so happy to be around them, because then you're not worried, right? You're not worried that there's going to be conflict or there's going to be something that, you know, your child is not going to be taken care of. But I wanted to ask you, and not everyone that follows my page is going to be in a position where they're able to have like the cleaner and have the even the friends to even drop in. Sometimes a lot, like you were talking about before, about that isolation and not having a big friend group for reasons, maybe it's guilt, shame, blame, whatnot. What would you say if you didn't have access financially to those resources? What could you do? What would you think that might be helpful for a parent that's in that situation?
Sure. I think each one of us lives life with a few privileges and a few disadvantages. And I think that's such a unique path that each one of us takes. So, for example, our family does have a disadvantage of a disability, but then we do have perhaps privileges of access to help and access to social, social connection. So I suppose it's for each family to ask what are our privileges, because I think that's kind of the way that you deal with a disadvantage.
Yeah,
So
I
is it,
love that.
mm,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, whether it's the power of knowledge, it's the power of equipping oneself, or just doing something for themselves. I don't know. It's really asking each parent asking themselves, okay, here is what I'm struggling with. What is going to help me cope with that or overcome this obstacle? What are my unique privileges that only I'm aware of?
That's beautiful. I love that reframe, because so many parents are struggling with that particular reframe, right? And I, myself included, before I got coaching, I looked at my child's autism as why me, why him, right? Why? Why couldn't it be anybody else? I don't want this. We're not murderers. We don't kill people. We don't go and steal things. Like I felt for a very long time that it was some sort of punishment. And I just think, you know, had I looked at this, that this was my chance to grow just as much as his chance to really look at what he needs, I would have looked at it from a completely different perspective. But it's not until we get that change, that breakthrough, that ability to see that difference, that you can stand back and appreciate that glass half full, right? Because until, exactly like what you said, until someone says it to you, it doesn't come to the forefront. No one actually says, oh, no, I don't think people walk through this journey going, I'm so lucky. And you know what I mean? Like, I say it now, but that's because I've had a lot of coaching. But, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that's necessarily how it is.
Yeah. And I think it's also a bit of using a bit of strategy. And for example, we don't do a lot of things as a family unit, the four of us together all the time. So we do things in different configurations. I take my younger son sometimes, I take my older son sometimes, and my husband does that. So in different configurations, that way, everybody has an opportunity to kind of have their needs met. So nobody's feeling like they're dimming their lights or just kind of going with the other person all the time.
So true. And obviously then that balance then becomes a hard thing to play out, because one person's definitely feeling a lot more exhausted than the other person, right? Then resentment sets in, and there's a lot more that goes to it. But I'm going to switch gears here for a second. Let's talk about balance. How do you balance your two children, one being neurotypical and the other child being neurodivergent? What does that balance look like?
So I think we could have an entire episode on this question. Yeah, it's interesting because our younger son is 4 years old. My older son is 8. My younger one is 4, and he's typical, but I don't think his life experience is quite typical, and he has his own grief. And I think we constantly remind ourselves that he is a child in his own right. I suppose, and it's very easy to kind of, and I don't know, my view could be subject to debate, but I just believe that, that every child has to be allowed their own space and time to find their relationship with what it's like to live with a sibling with neurodivergence, and there's no imposed expectation. Because, you know, it is a huge loss for a child to not have a sibling that they can play with, to not have a sibling that can just join them with their other friendship groups, a sibling that looks so different and behaves so differently. So I think it's constantly checking in with the neurotypical child as well when feelings come up. And, you know, as parents don't really get a break. We're constantly working with this, but I think offering the neurotypical child lots of breaks to make them feel, no, to help them understand that this is not their entire world. There is a neurotypical world. And so every time there's an opportunity for a play date, I jump and take it. I'm always trying to connect my younger son with peers so that he can have these neurotypical experiences. And also, I suppose, keeping an eye on how much responsibility we expect or that we put on him, because a sibling cannot love their sibling like parents love a child, right? It's not unconditional. So I think making that distinction is so important.
Oh, I love that so much because I speak to so many parents who unwillingly and unconsciously put a lot of pressure on their neurotypical children because there's so much effort that is required for their neurodivergent child that
Yeah.
sometimes it can just feel like a lot. And I totally agree with you. Having those breaks for that neurotypical child is so important
Yeah.
because they're little humans too, right? They can absolutely feel resentment. They can absolutely feel, and then at the other end, they can also feel that responsibility, right? That feeling that, oh, I need to protect my brother or my sister. I need to make sure that they're okay. I need to make sure that and that's a heavy load for a young child to carry. So making sure that they are feeling special, that they are taken out, and I think that it's a really valid point and a really important point for a lot of parents to hear because sometimes we can forget, and having those reminders is really important. So
Yeah. And I think most they could, you know, our neurotypical children could be the greatest advocates. They could be, you know, but I think that has to come quite organically. Just
yeah,
allow that has to come up with their own in their own space and in their own time.
yeah, definitely. I also think that I'm going back to my own daughter's journey, and my angel boy was diagnosed when she was just 6 weeks old. So she was so familiar with having therapists come in and out of the house and
Yeah.
watching that now that she's much older, she's 8 now, that she will often replicate that therapy with him
Mhm.
because what she's modeled off myself or whether she's seen it through a therapist. And
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if she ends up in allied health. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just
Yeah.
think that it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I could grant you one wish, what would it be?
Um, can I wish that this wouldn't have happened? Yeah.
Yes, you're allowed to wish that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I guess if that's not a possibility, you know, I'm so aware of our son's vulnerability. So I think my wish would be that he's really surrounded by care and understanding. We have a gorgeous support worker who calls my son a prince. So I would like him to be that, where his needs are met and his well being is always, you know, prioritized, even if we can't provide that directly ourselves.
So important. And that's part of the educational piece, right? A lot of neurotypical families, educators, people out in the world are still learning about autism and still don't understand why autistics do the things that they do and why they
Yeah.
need special accommodations and why they need specific things to make them feel more comfortable. And I think that that is really an important part of how we're going to move forward and what that looks like. And I
Yeah.
think just more education is so important so that we can be like our autistic children can grow up in this world and feel comfortable and succeed and do all the things that we would hope them to do, but
Yeah.
so that they don't feel like sensory overwhelm and they don't feel like there's such a huge gap between their world and the neurotypical world.
Yeah.
um okay, so how do you hang on, I'm just going through my questions. I think I made a jump one. Nope, I think we've gone through anything. Is there any other thing that you would like to add before we jump into rapid fire?
Yeah, I suppose just around the point of grief and loss, I think it's, in my experience, I think it can go either ways. Like it could make one become so focused on oneself and, focused inwards and have the resentment. But I feel that it can also, provide a huge zeal for creativity and just, to live, a drive to live life and to do new things. So I think it's appreciating that and hopefully arriving at that place when grief can be a motivator, a zeal to do things for oneself, yeah, rather than becoming overly consumed on themselves.
I love that so much. And I think that's one of the things I wish that I had have had when we were going through the journey, is just having that mindset change rather than it being a tragedy, looking at it as
Yeah,
a completely different thing, right? Because I did feel like it was a tragedy, but I don't look at him now and go, oh, it's a tragedy. No, I think you are a gorgeous boy. And I think that a lot of parents they pour their hearts and souls into these children. And
yeah,
because they have their best intentions at heart, but we also need to remember that we need to look after ourselves as well, right?
yeah,
We need to put our oxygen masks on first. Otherwise, you're not going to see that extension of that child continue, because
yeah,
you eventually will burn out. So I think that's a really important role to ask as well. Okay,
yeah.
rapid fire. Are you ready, Dr.
All
Megha?
right, I think so.
Don't worry, it's not going to be anything too hard.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've received about your son's autism diagnosis?
Um, I think it would be parent the child that's before you, not the child that you imagined or you wished you had.
That speaks so true. So true. I can attest to that one quite a lot, because it is hard.
Yeah.
Okay. What's one word you would use to describe your autism journey?
A roller coaster.
Yes. A fast one with lots of dips. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, what is other than therapy, what is your go-to self-care activity?
Yeah, as a family, we're quite into fitness and adventure. So we do enjoy being out in the nature, having, doing hikes with families, other beautiful families. And music is a big part. So music really regulates our son as well. So my husband is really talented. He plays the drums and I sing as well. So I think music is something that has helped. And work. I love my work. I was trained in working with children, but I think since having kids of my own, I prefer adult conversations. And I suppose just this whole life experience has elevated each one of these experiences for us. There's just so much more meaning in each one of these.
I love that so much. And I think sometimes work can be a beautiful space to just
Yeah,
decompress from not having to deal with the stims and the meltdowns and all the other things that come with it, and just to remember who you were again as an adult, because our identities can so get lost sometimes, and that's really hard as well.
yeah.
Um, is there a book or a podcast that you would recommend to anyone listening?
Yeah, I think my go-to is the general parenting resources, not more than autism resources. I think it's just any uh, mostly parenting advice that applies to all children, because I think even children with autism do benefit really from or have the right to gentle parenting and, uh, parenting that's so attuned to their emotional states. Um, some of the people that I listen to are Dr. Becky Kennedy, Shefali, Dr. Gordon Neufeld. I think they all have a similar approach, like there's an attachment focus and guiding children with more compassion rather than controlling children, and actually also helping parents reflect on their own emotional growth in the process. So I know we're raising children, but I think we're also really raising ourselves in this process.
Oh, I love that. I love Dr. Shafali's work. What I'll do, guys, anyone listening, I will grab the links from Dr. Megha, so that I will link to all of those podcasts and books so that you can have access to them. So you won't have to go searching all over the internet to find them. Okay, one last question. If you could give one piece of advice to parents of newly diagnosed autistic children, what would you tell them?
Um, it's probably really hard to believe now, but it gets better. You'll find your feet again, and you'll find that you're a lot stronger and more grounded, and you'll have lots of victories in your life going ahead, just quiet victories that only you know at a very personal level.
Don't mind me, just tearing up over here. Oh my God, so much of what you said today has hit home in so many ways. And I hope that so many parents listen to this and re-listen to it and think, what can I do better? And I think that having someone to talk to, whether or not that's me, whether it's somebody else, I don't care. But as long as you're speaking to somebody, it's so important. It's so important to just be able to figure out what's going on in here so we can match what's happening in here, right? Because I'm telling you right now, burnout is it's a real thing, but it does get better though, Dr. Megha. It does, right? And I'm absolute testament. Like, I look at my son now and I think how lucky we are and how excited we are and how much of an adventure it has been. Has it been scary? Yes. Has it been tearful? 100%. Have I worried? And that worry, I don't think ever really goes away. It comes and ebbs and flows. But I think it's so important to know that there's a child psychologist out there like yourself who has lived experience, who understands it. And I think that's a huge thing and a huge plus in your favor, right? Because like I said before in the beginning, not many child psychologists have that. And I think that's really important. Thank you so much, Dr. Megha. I really enjoyed our time together. It has been so wonderful. So many gems have been dropped. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, not really. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.